Hello, dreamers, and welcome to Dreaming Isle. I'm here to guide you into a calm and magical place tonight. Before we begin, take a moment to like this video and subscribe if you haven't already. It helps bring more dreamers to our little corner of the stars. And if you'd like, share in the comments, what's the world outside your window like right now? Now, find your cozy spot. Let go of the day, and let the story begin. They call me Ranger, but there's no forest left to patrol. Only salt flats crusted like old bones, and blackened hills where ash drifts in the wind like ghostly snow. I walk because I cannot rest. I speak because I cannot forget. Long ago, before I took the vow, I lived in the green. Pines whispering secrets, streams singing cold hymns over polished stones. But that was before the gods left. Before they abandoned us to the old hungers that crawl from the earth when no one is watching. I was chosen at the final burning of the Shrike Grove. My village offered me as payment. Blood for blood. I remember the ritual. Smoke blackening the dawn. My wrists bound in red cord. The High Warden's voice droning the vow in a tongue that bled when spoken. You will walk. You will witness. You will speak what should not be forgotten. I haven't slept since. Not properly. Dreams are doors I dare not open. Tonight I camp in the lee of a cracked altar stone, its old sigils eroded by centuries of wind and regret. The fire sputters in the thin air. My fingers ache from the cold, but I keep writing. Because the vow demands a record. The journal's leather cover is soft as old skin. Ink freezes on the nib between lines. But I force myself. I write about the blighted fields where nothing grows but thorns. The fog that moves against the wind. The shapes in it that watch with too many eyes. Because if I don't, no one will remember. And then they'll come back. Worse than before. I close the book. The wind screams over the altar, whipping ash into the dark. I press my hand to the carved words. I remember. And for tonight, that is enough. Dawn crawls slow and bitter across the salt flats. The sun is a pale wound in the east, bleeding cold light over a dead land. I push on. My breath fogs in front of me, hanging in the still air like a ghost that won't let go. No tracks but mine. Even carrion birds avoid these flats. Nothing to eat but old curses and the wind's dry laughter. I follow the nameless path. It isn't marked on any map, but I know it the way a scar knows the blade that made it. It cuts through salt and ash, winding toward places the old scribes pretended didn't exist. My boots crunch over brittle crust. Sometimes I see shapes ahead, rising from the glare. Shrines, maybe, or bones. Hard to tell until I'm close. I stop at one, a cairn of black stones stacked in impossible balance. Symbols carved in deep lines that pulse when touched. I press my fingers to them, ignoring the burn. I see you, I whisper. The stone vibrates. The symbols glow with dull, sullen light. Faces swim in the rock. Not carved, trapped. Their mouths move in soundless pleading. I swallow. My throat is raw from too many confessions. I take out the journal. Ink spills across the page like fresh blood. I write their shapes, the words I can see but can't read. I draw their faces, because the vow says they must be remembered. The wind dies for a moment. Silence falls so heavy it bends my back. Then the wind returns. Cold, mocking. I close the book. I move on, because this path doesn't end, and neither does the remembering. By midday, the salt flats give way to broken ground, black rock like shattered teeth. A ravine opens at my feet, its depth swallowing sound. I follow its edge until I see the shrine. It's half collapsed, stone split by frost and centuries of guilt. But the central idol still stands. A woman carved from obsidian, blindfolded, mouth open in eternal scream. Water seeps from her eyes. Thin rivulets of brine run down her face, collecting in a cracked basin at her feet. I've heard of her. The mourner. The patron of lost causes and bargains that couldn't be kept. I kneel before her. My knees crunch frost. The journal is heavy in my hand. The wind dies. Speak. My voice shakes. I remember you. The brine in the basin ripples. I see faces beneath the surface. Familiar. Villagers who gave me up to the warden. Friends who looked away. My own face. Younger. Hopeful. I bite back a sob. I open the book. Ink drips onto the page, slithering into words I don't want to write. I am the price. I am the witness. I will not let you be forgotten. The wind returns with a wail that rattles the shrine. Brine overflows the basin, steaming in the cold. I close the journal. My breath catches. I stand, knees stiff, because there's no forgiveness here, only memory, and I will carry it. The path climbs out of the ravine into a forest of black pines, their needles crusted with frost. The air is wet here, heavy with the promise of snow that never falls. Fog seeps between trunks. It moves against the wind. It curls around my legs like a cat too starved to purr. I tighten my grip on the journal. Speak. I don't want to. The vow doesn't care. Shapes drift in the fog. Hollow-eyed things with mouths sewn shut. When I look at them too long, they unravel, slithering back into the mist with wet sounds. I keep moving. My boots leave black smears on the frost. At a clearing, I stop. The fog gathers before me like a curtain. Faces push through, mouths splitting wide in silent scream. Speak. My throat closes. I force it open. I see you. The fog hisses. Faces swell and pop. Ink drips from my lips, black and bitter. I open the journal. Pages flutter though there's no wind. Ink flows without end. I write them. Their shapes. They're pleading. The words they cannot say. The fog recoils. For a moment the clearing is clear. The wind returns, colder but cleaner. I close the book. My fingers are black with ink. I move on, because the hunger in the fog is memory, and I am its meal. Night falls fast in these woods. The fog thins, but doesn't leave. It hangs in tatters from branches, pale and wet as old skin. I find a ruined watchtower. Stones slick with lichen, roof caved in. I climb anyway. Higher ground feels safer, even if it isn't. The wind howls through gaps in the wall, moaning like something with lungs. I huddle in a corner. The journal rests on my knees, warm and pulsing. Speak. My eyes burn. I'm so tired. But the vow is hunger that never ends. I open the book. Ink seeps across the page. Symbols crawl. Faces scream. I dip my finger in the ink. It bites, cold as grave dirt. I write. I am the ranger who remembers. I am the price they paid. I will not let them fade. Blood wells from my fingertip, mixing with ink. The words glow faintly before sinking into the page like water into dry earth. The wind softens. The fog draws back. Silence falls like a blanket. I close the book. My heart hammers. Because I know tomorrow I will do it again. Because someone has to. And that someone is me. Dawn is a lie here. The sun rises, pale and bloated behind rotting clouds, but its light doesn't warm. I descend from the ruined tower stiff with cold, boots crunching brittle frost. The path ahead is marked by toppled milestones carved in languages older than the warden's oath. Their symbols twist when I look too long, as if they remember a script that was never meant to be spoken. I touch one. My fingers numb instantly. Ink seeps from the cracks, crawling over my skin in writhing lines. Speak. I shudder. The journal feels hot at my side, pulsing like a heart that doesn't beat for me. I sit in the road, knees stiff. I open the book. The ink on the pages moves of its own accord, forming words in a tongue that tastes of rust and regret. I am bound. I am the watcher. I am the price. Faces stare up at me. Hollow eyes. Mouths sewn shut with black wire. My voice is raw. I remember you. The wind stops. Frost falls from dead grass like ashes. I force myself to keep reading. Every word burns in my throat, leaving blisters on my tongue. When I finish, the symbols on the milestone glow faintly before going dark. The wind returns, keening low like morning. I close the journal. My fingers are black with ink that doesn't wash away. I stand, because this road doesn't care about my pain. It only demands I remember. So I keep walking, because forgetting would be worse. I find it at midday, a hollow filled with trees that should be dead but refuse to fall. Their bark is blackened, split with frost, and their branches twisted to clawed shapes. No fruit grows here, only shriveled husks clinging like corpses. Crows perch among the limbs, silent and watching. Their eyes gleam with hungry intelligence. They don't caw. They don't fly. I step into the orchard. The air is colder here. Every breath feels like swallowing shards of glass. The journal squirms at my side, eager. Speak. I ignore it at first. The wind rattles branches like bones in a bag. Faces appear in the bark, not carved, grown. Their mouths hang open, frozen mid-scream. My stomach churns. I drop to my knees, frost soaking through my trousers. I pull the journal free. Ink runs thick and black over my fingers, dripping onto the ground where it freezes in glossy pools. I open the book. The pages hiss, ink boiling. Speak. I force the words out. I see you. The wind dies. The crows lean closer, eyes unblinking. I remember you. I read the words written in my own hand, but not by me. Of deals made in blood. Of knowledge stolen and hoarded. Of the old gods who demanded silence in exchange for survival. The orchard moans. The faces in the bark crack and peel. I keep reading until my voice breaks. Then I close the journal. The wind returns. The crows scatter. I stand on shaking legs. Because someone has to remember. And I am that someone. The road leads me to a cleft in the hills, narrow and choked with brambles. I cut my way through with a dull knife until my arms ache and the thorns are slick with black sap. At the end stands a shrine built of stacked stones, its roof caved in, moss creeping like old guilt over every surface. A crude idol leans against the back wall, a thing with too many eyes, all of them blind. I know this place. The old wardens called it the Shrine of Bargains, where ancestors traded secrets to keep the fog at bay. I step inside. The air is close, damp, and smells of mildew and old blood. The ground is littered with offerings, broken charms, scraps of parchment, teeth. The journal pulses. Speak. My hand shakes as I open it. Ink crawls over the pages, forming words that accuse. I am the liar. I am the thief. I am the witness. Faces swim in the ink, mouths stitched shut with rusted wire. I press my back to the cold stone, sinking to the floor. My breath trembles. I remember you. The idol weeps black liquid from its blind eyes. It pools around my boots, cold and thick. I read the words aloud. Every confession, every truth I never wanted to know. The wind outside wails through broken stones. When I'm done, the liquid seeps away, vanishing into cracks in the floor. The idol's eyes close. I close the journal. My fingers leave black prints on the cover. I stand, because forgetting is the real curse, and I am cursed to remember. Dusk falls like a burial shroud. The path drops into a hollow filled with fog that clings to the ground like hungry fingers. Trees arch overhead, branches forming a cage of black silhouettes. The wind doesn't blow here. Nothing moves except the fog, which curls and slithers even when I'm still. My breath steams. I smell rot. The journal pulses, hot and alive. Speak. Shapes drift in the mist. Human, almost. Their eyes glow faintly. Their mouths hang open, slack with eternal scream. I press my back to a tree. Bark splits under my weight, oozing black sap. Speak. I can't breathe. My fingers dig into the satchel, pulling the journal free. It opens on its own. Ink spills in thick ropes across the page. I force my voice to work. I see you. The shapes in the fog freeze. Their heads tilt, listening. I remember you. The wind returns with a low moan. The fog recoils. I read every word that appears on the page. Words written in my hand, but born from something older. Confessions, bargains, betrayals. My voice cracks. When I finish, the fog retreats, slithering back into the earth. Silence falls. The journal quiets, its warmth fading. I close it slowly. My knees tremble as I stand. Because I'm not done. Because there are always more to remember. Night clamps down like a jaw. I find a place to rest under a half-collapsed arch, its stones black with old fire. Stars don't show here. The sky is a smear of bruised gray. My fire is a feeble thing. Twigs hiss and pop, throwing sickly light over broken stone. Shadows shift at the edge of the circle. Watching. Waiting. The journal lies on my knees. Warm. Alive. Speak. I'm so tired. My eyelids droop. But the vow claws at me. Speak. My fingers find the latch. The journal opens, pages sticky with ink that oozes like blood. Faces stare up at me, my own among them. I swallow. My throat is raw. I remember you. The wind dies. I remember the bargain struck in fear, the knowledge traded for safety, the lives paid so others could forget. The fire crackles. Sparks drift up and vanish. I read the words that appear on the page, words I can't stop writing. I am the price. I am the memory. I will not let you be forgotten. The shadows draw back. The wind returns, cold but clean. I close the journal. My breath shakes. I lie back on the cold stone, eyes open to the dark. Because sleep is a luxury I gave up when I took the vow. Because someone has to remember. And tonight, that someone is me. Dawn breaks with a hiss of wind across dead grass. My fire is ash, cold and lifeless. I stamp it out and shoulder my satchel. The journal presses against my side like a wound that won't close. I follow a road that barely exists, 2 ruts through salt-blasted soil. The wind carries the taste of old tears. Salt crusts the edges of the path like frost. The crossing is marked by 2 black pillars, cracked and half-swallowed by earth. Symbols run across them in deep scars, bleeding faint light when I approach. Speak. My throat tightens. I set the journal on a flat rock. The wind dies. Silence falls so complete it roars in my ears. I open the cover. Ink seeps across the page, forming shapes that twitch like dying insects. Words crawl, writhe, arrange themselves into accusations. Liar. Thief. Witness. Faces appear, mouths sewn shut, eyes pleading. My fingers shake. I see you. I whisper. The wind holds its breath. I remember you. The symbols on the pillars flare. I read the words. Each one digs at old wounds. Confessions I don't want. Memories that aren't mine, but that I carry because no one else will. The light in the symbols fades, leaving only dark scars. The wind returns, colder but cleaner. I close the journal, breath fogging the air. My knees ache from the cold ground. But I stand. Because there is no other way. I keep walking. Because forgetting is the worst sin. And I won't be its accomplice. The road narrows, funneling into a gorge where the wind screams like a wounded thing. At its heart is the bridge, built of bones and carved teeth, mortared with black resin that smells of burned hair. The wind whistles through hollow skulls set in the railings, giving them voices that wail with every gust. I cross slowly. My boots scrape bone. Joints creak under my weight. Halfway across, I stop. The journal pulses like a second heart. Speak. My fingers fumble at the latch. The cover opens on its own. Ink spills out, pooling black on white. Words crawl into being. Remember us. Faces form in the ink, mouths twisted in agony. I swallow hard. My voice breaks. I remember you. The wind stops screaming. Silence falls like a blade. I read the words aloud. Of bargains made with old gods. Of villages offered in exchange for another year of safety. Of children marked for sacrifice so that others could sleep easy. My voice shakes. The bridge creaks but holds. The skulls fall silent. When I finish, the wind returns with a gentler sigh. I close the journal, fingers black with ink. I cross the rest of the bridge without looking back. Because that's the vow. To carry them. To speak them. Even when no one wants to hear. Dusk falls in a swirl of cold mist. I find a hollow ring with standing stones. Each is cracked, worn by centuries of wind and confession. This is an old place, a place of bargains. I set my pack down. The stones lean inward like old men huddled to hear gossip. I gather driftwood and build a fire. The flames spit and gutter, throwing uneven light across carvings that slither when I look away. The journal lies on my lap, warm as fever. Speak. I swallow. My throat is raw from too many truths, but the vow doesn't care. I open the book. Ink spills like blood. Words form in a language older than my ancestors' bones. Faces leer from the page. Speak. My breath shudders. I see you. I whisper. The wind dies. I remember you. I read them. Every bargain. Every betrayal. Every price paid in silence so that others could forget. The stones vibrate, a low moan rising from their cracked faces. I keep reading. My voice breaks. Tears cut cold paths down my cheeks. When I'm done, the wind returns. The fire burns brighter. The stones fall silent. I close the journal with shaking fingers, because that's the work, to tell it, so it can't be hidden, not anymore. Morning breaks cold and gray. My breath steams in the dawn as I climb from the hollow. The path twists through dead heather and frost-stiff grass. Ahead stands the shrine. 2 pillars flank a broken arch, each carved with bound hands. The ropes are so lifelike they seem to tighten when I look too long. Blood-black stains crust their bases. I stop at the threshold. My heart hammers. The journal squirms at my side. Speak. I unshoulder the satchel, dropping to my knees on frozen earth. I open the book. Ink drips like tears onto the page. Faces bloom, mouths gagged with twisted ropes. Speak. My voice cracks. I see you. The wind stills. I remember you. I read. Of prisoners offered to old things beneath the hills. Of secrets kept by breaking bodies. Of truth bound and gagged so no one would know the cost of peace. My voice shakes. The bound hands on the pillars flex. Blood weeps from the cracks. I keep reading until the ropes on the carving slacken. The wind returns with a low sigh. I close the journal. My fingers are black with ink that bites like frostbite. I stand slowly. Because I must. Because no one else will. The road ends at a cairn of ancient stones stacked with impossible care. Moss creeps over them in green veins, frost rhyming every edge. Symbols carved so deep they bleed shadow. This is a place of memory. My breath hitches as I approach. The journal pulses. Speak. I sink to my knees. My bones ache from cold and confession. I open the book. Ink swells, pushing up words that boil and writhe. Faces press against the parchment from the inside. My fingers tremble. I see you. The wind dies. I remember you. I read them. Of the child offered to buy a season of safe harvest. Of the village burned to keep an old god asleep. Of bargains made in desperation that cursed generations. My voice breaks. The symbols on the stones flare with green light, then fade. The wind returns, colder but clear. I close the journal slowly. Tears freeze on my cheeks. I press my hand to the cairn. I will remember, because forgetting is the worst sin. And this is my penance, because I chose to speak, and will never stop. The road leads me down into a valley choked with dead trees. Their branches are naked claws, blackened by fire that burned long before my birth. Ash clings to everything like regret that will not wash away. I step carefully, boots sinking in soft gray powder. My breath sends little clouds drifting. The wind howls low and hungry through the skeletal trunks. The journal pulses at my side, eager. Speak. I try to ignore it. The wind bites harder. The trees shift with cracking groans, as if remembering the flames. I stop beside one enormous stump split open like a gaping mouth. Its heart is black as old sin. My fingers tremble as I pull the journal free. Ink leaks from the seams, dripping onto my boots. I open it. Words crawl, letters twisting like worms. I am the liar. I am the thief. I am the witness. Faces leer up at me. Eyes hollow. Mouths sewn shut with wire. Speak. My voice breaks. I see you. The wind holds its breath. I remember you. I read them. Every sin they want me to forget. Every price paid in blood and silence. The stump creaks. Ash bursts upward in choking clouds. I keep reading until my throat is raw. When I stop, the wind shifts. Softer, less cruel. The journal quiets. I close it carefully. My fingers are black with ink that refuses to wash away. I stand, because the vow doesn't end, and neither does the road. By dusk, I reach a stream, its water black as old blood. Stones bridge it in a crooked line, slick with frost. No sound but my own breath. Even the wind goes silent here. I step onto the first stone. The journal beats at my side like a heart that isn't mine. Speak. My foot slips. I catch myself, fingers digging into wet rock. My gloves soak through. The cold bites. I force myself onto the next stone. Faces appear in the water, blurred, screaming without sound. Speak. I kneel on the slick surface. My breath shudders. I pull the journal out. It opens by itself. Ink pools, spreading across the page in twisting symbols that hurt to read. My voice is thin. I see you. The stream stops moving. Water freezes solid in a heartbeat. I remember you. I read them. Of the children sent into caves so the fog wouldn't cross the river. Of the elders who cut their own tongues out so they wouldn't speak the truth. My voice cracks. The faces in the ice press close. I keep reading until the words on the page burn my eyes. The ice groans, cracks, then flows again, slow and dark. The wind returns. I close the journal. My fingers shake, but I stand, because the only way forward is through, and someone has to carry these truths. The path rises steep and mean. Rocks cut through old roots like bones snap to keep a secret buried. At the top, I find the place the wardens warned about in whispers, the place of chains. Broken pillars lean in circles, their tops crowned with rusted iron. Links dangle like severed limbs, crusted in black rot. I swallow. My throat is dry. The journal hums at my side. Speak. I step into the circle. The wind dies instantly. Even the crows in the distance fall silent. Rust flakes as the chains shift. Faces appear in the corroded iron, mouths stretching wide in agony. I sink to my knees. The journal jumps in my grip, eager. I open it. Ink boils. Words bite at the page. I am the price. I am the memory. I am the sin. My voice trembles. I see you. The chains groan. Links twist and tighten. I remember you. I read them. Of prisoners offered to the fog so villages could be spared. Of children shackled in dark rooms to keep old gods sleeping. The iron screams. I don't stop. I keep reading until the rust turns black and crumbles. The wind returns in a cold, sorrowful sigh. I close the journal. My hands are black with ink. My breath steams. But I stand. Because I must. Night falls heavy. I find shelter in a cave, its mouth split like a wound in the hillside. I light no fire. The walls drip with cold water that echoes in the dark. The journal rests in my lap, warm as fever. Speak. My breath rattles. The darkness feels alive, pressing close, listening. Faces shift in the stone. Their mouths open and close without sound. Speak. My fingers tremble. I open the journal. Ink runs like black blood across the page. Words crawl into shapes that scream. My voice is ragged. I see you. The echoes answer. I remember you. I read them. Of villages emptied so one could be spared. Of old gods fed truth so they would sleep. Of my own bargains made in fear. The cave walls groan. Water drips faster. Faces leer at me from the stone. I keep reading until my voice breaks. The echoes die. Silence presses close, cold but honest. I close the journal. My fingers leave black stains on the stone. I lean back, breath shuddering. Because even here, the vow holds. Even here, I must speak. Because forgetting is the worst sin. Dawn comes slow and mean. I force myself out of the cave, breath smoking. The wind cuts like knives. Snow falls in thin, bitter flakes that melt on black soil. Ahead lies a threshold marked by twin stones carved with spiral runes. Frost rims every groove. I step forward. The journal pulses. Speak. My breath rattles. I drop to my knees. I open the book. Ink spills onto the frost, sizzling. Words rise like steam. I am the witness. I am the price. I will remember. Faces twist in the ink. Mouths open in silent scream. My voice trembles. I see you. The wind dies. I remember you. I read them. Of the priests who buried knowledge so no one would know. Of sacrifices demanded by old gods. Of my own part in keeping the silence. The runes glow with pale light. The snow stops falling. The wind holds its breath. I keep reading until the frost melts in a circle around me. When I finish, the light fades. The wind returns, softer. I close the journal. My breath smokes. My hands are black with ink. But I stand. Because this road doesn't end. Because forgetting cannot be allowed. Because someone has to remember. And that someone is me. The path climbs to a ridge where wind screams like a chorus of damned souls. The cold is sharper here, biting through cloak and skin alike. My breath fogs in ragged bursts that vanish as fast as they come. At the top stands the gate. Two monoliths of ice-carved stone, covered in runes that pulse with pale blue light. Between them hangs a door of frost, clear as glass but thick as a coffin lid. Shapes move behind it, shifting in frozen silence. Faces press against the ice from the other side, eyes wide, mouths locked in silent howl. My heart hammers. The journal twitches at my side. Speak. I sink to my knees on blackened, frost-hardened soil. My fingers ache with cold. I pull the journal free. The leather is slick with freezing condensation, but it radiates heat like a dying hearth. I open it. Ink flows, thick and dark, crawling over the page in coiling lines. Words appear. Remember us. Carry us. Speak. Faces swim in the ink, eyes wide in accusation. My voice shakes. I see you. The wind dies instantly. I remember you. The ice groans. Cracks spider across the frost glass door. Shapes press harder from within, desperate to break free. I read them. The names. The sins. The betrayals carved in my own hand. Bargains made with blood and silence. The runes on the pillars flare, icy light illuminating the hollow. My voice breaks. When I finish, the shapes behind the ice relax. Their mouths close. The cracks seal. The wind returns, gentler, brushing frost from my hair. I close the journal with shaking hands. Because the vow doesn't care about my fear. Only that I keep speaking. So I rise. And I move on. Descending from the ridge, the path narrows to a corridor of ancient standing stones. Each one leans inward, covered in lichen like old scabs. Faces are carved deep into their surfaces, too many eyes, mouths locked open in laughter that never ends. I shiver. The wind is muffled here, as if the world is holding its breath. The journal presses at my side like a burden eager to speak. Speak. I walk between the stones. Their eyes follow me. Their mouths split wider. Cracks weep black water that freezes before hitting the ground. My breath fogs in ragged clouds. I stop. I kneel. The journal throbs. I open it. Ink slithers like serpents across the pages, coiling into words that snarl and bite. Witness. Confess. Remember. Faces leer from the ink, mouths gaping in silent demand. My voice cracks. I see you. The wind dies. I remember you. The stones vibrate, laughter rising in groans of splitting rock. I read them. Of the sacrifices bound in silence. Of villages sold for a year's safety. Of truths traded like coin to keep old gods asleep. My voice trembles. The laughter dies. The stones fall silent. The ink cools on the page. I close the journal slowly. My hands are black with it. I stand. Because the road continues. Because the vow has no end. And I cannot stop. By dusk I reach a river, black and sluggish under a skin of cracking ice. A bridge of fallen logs and rusted chains crosses it, sagging with age and neglect. The wind carries the stink of rot from the water. Shapes shift beneath the ice, pressing up with pale hands. Faces just under the surface. The journal grows hot at my side. Speak. My mouth is dry. I force myself onto the first log. It groans under my weight. Chains creak, tightening like nooses. I shuffle forward. The ice below cracks. Fingers scrape the underside, leaving bloody smears that freeze instantly. Speak. I drop to my knees on the slickwood. My breath rattles. I pull the journal out. It opens on its own. Ink pours like blood, forming words that burn to look at. Remember. Confess. Faces rise in the ink, mouths screaming in silence. My voice is ragged. I see you. The wind stops. I remember you. The river groans. I splits with wet cracks. Hands reach up but freeze again before touching me. I read them. Of the people drowned to keep the fog away. Of lives offered in silence so others wouldn't have to speak. My voice falters. But I finish. The river calms. The shapes sink, leaving black water smooth and unbroken. I close the journal. The wind returns, biting but clean. I stand. I keep crossing. Because forgetting is the true betrayal. And I won't do it. The land rises, bare and broken. Thorn bushes claw at me, their branches black and brittle, scraping skin through my cloak. Blood seeps from 100 tiny cuts, freezing as it runs. At the crest lies a gate of intertwined branches and bones. Skulls peer from the weave, eyes hollow, mouths stretched wide. I hesitate. The journal throbs at my side, eager. Speak. The wind dies. Even the thorns seem to listen. I drop to my knees. My breath hitches. I open the book. Ink spills, forming words that pulse like wounds. Liar. Witness. Confessor. Faces press up from the page, mouths moving in silent demand. My voice cracks. I see you. The wind is gone. I remember you. The gate creaks, branches splitting. Skulls shift, jaws opening wider. I read them. Of elders who silenced their own children to keep secrets buried. Of truths gagged with fear so the fog wouldn't wake. My voice falters, but I keep reading, until the gate parts. The skulls close their mouths. The wind returns, soft. I close the journal with shaking fingers. My hands are black with ink. I stand. I walk through, because silence feeds the fog, and I will not be silent. Night descends like a funeral shroud. I find shelter among ancient stones stacked in impossible balance. Moss glows faintly, green fire under moonless sky. Water seeps from between stones, black as oil, dripping in slow, steady tears. This is the Weeping Cairn, a place of old bargains. I set my pack down. The journal is hot, shaking in my grip. Speak. I sink to the ground, knees cracking on cold rock. I open the book. Ink crawls, forming words that cut deep. Witness. Confess. Remember. Faces swim in the ink, mouths gaping, eyes blind with pain. My voice is a whisper. I see you. The wind dies. I remember you. I read them. Of families sold to buy a single winter's safety. Of children given to the fog in secret so the village would forget. Of my own cowardice, choosing silence over truth. The water runs thicker, black tears steaming in the cold. I keep reading, until my voice is gone. The wind returns with a sigh. The cairn stops weeping. I close the journal, fingers shaking, ink freezing on my skin. I press my hand to the stones. I will remember, because that is my vow, and there is no release. Only the road. Morning comes grudgingly. The sky is iron, clouds thick as lead. Frost clings to my beard and lashes. The path winds through broken fields where nothing grows but thorns and regret. At the center stands the black well. Stones circle it, each carved with spirals that tighten like nooses the longer I stare. The well's mouth is wide, rimmed with old blood. No bucket, no rope, just endless dark. I approach carefully. The journal thrums at my side, eager. Speak. The wind dies. My breath fogs in the dead air. I kneel beside the well. Peering in, I see nothing but black that swallows thought. My voice shakes. I see you. Faces appear in the dark, twisted, hollow-eyed. Their mouths stretch wide in soundless pleading. Speak. My fingers tremble as I pull the journal free. Ink leaks over my hands, cold as grave dirt. I open it. Words squirm into place, forming accusations. Liar. Coward. Witness. Faces press up from the page, mouths working silently. I remember you. The wind holds its breath. I read them. Of children thrown into this well, so the fog wouldn't cross the fields. Of elders who watched in silence. Of prayers offered with blood-stained hands. The well groans. The blackness seems to pulse. I don't stop. I read until my voice breaks. The faces in the well fade. The darkness calms. The wind returns with a cold sigh. I close the journal. My fingers are black with ink that won't wash away. I stand. Because that's the vow. To speak. To remember. Even when no one wants to hear. The wind hounds me down the hill, biting and relentless. I trudge on, cloak snapping behind me like a wounded banner. The road turns to white dust that clings to boots and breath alike. Soon I see it, a path paved with bones bleached by centuries of sun and frost. Skulls grin up at me, hollow-eyed. Ribs interlock to make stairs where the ground rises. Each step creaks, cracks, whispers. The journal is a hot brand at my side. Speak. My mouth is dry. I stop. I kneel on frozen bone. My breath rasps in the silence. I pull the journal free. It opens on its own. Ink runs in black rivulets that pool on ivory. Words crawl into place. Witness. Confess. Remember. Faces leer from the page, mouths open in mocking laughter. My voice is raw. I see you. The wind dies. I remember you. I read them. Of the families forced to walk this path to prove their loyalty. Of the ones who fell and were left behind to pave it. Of the wardens who watched without mercy. The bones shift. Groan. I don't stop. I keep reading until the wind returns, shrieking low and sorrowful. The laughter fades. I close the journal slowly. My hands are black with ink. But I stand. Because the path doesn't end. And neither does the remembering. Night falls while I walk. I find shelter in the ruins of an old watchtower. Stones cracked by frost. Roof gone. Stairs crumbling into blackness. I climb anyway. Each step groans under my weight. Wind whistles through empty arrow slits, screaming like lost children. At the top, I sit on cold stone. Stars peer through torn clouds, pale and uncaring. The journal is warm in my lap. Speak. My breath shakes. I open it. Ink slithers onto the page, coiling into words that cut. Witness. Confess. Remember. Faces form, twisted in agony. My voice cracks. I see you. The wind dies. I remember you. I read them. Of watchers who rang bells as warnings but never opened gates. Of villages burned to deny the fog new hosts. Of children hidden in cellars while neighbors screamed. My voice breaks. The wind holds its breath. I keep reading until my throat is raw and blood spatters the page. The stones vibrate. Cracks spread. The wind returns, gentle. I close the journal carefully. My fingers leave black smears on the stone. I sit for a long time, breath rasping, because silence is betrayal, and I will not betray them. Dawn crawls reluctantly over the land, light pale as old parchment. I come to a crossroads marked by a gnarled, dead tree. Its branches reach in all directions like blackened veins. Ropes hang from them, frayed and stiff. Beneath it, the ground is churned mud and old blood, frozen into hard, twisted shapes. I stop. The journal throbs. Speak. The wind dies. Even the ropes stop swaying. I kneel. Frost bites through my trousers. I open the journal. Ink leaks like blood onto the frozen mud. Words crawl into form. Witness. Confess. Remember. Faces leer, mouths twisted in condemnation. My voice trembles. I see you. The wind holds its breath. I remember you. I read them. Of travelers hanged as warnings. Of elders who nodded silently as the knots tightened. Of families who closed their doors to avoid guilt. The ropes creak. The tree groans. I keep reading until the words burn my eyes. The wind returns, carrying the stink of old blood away. I close the journal slowly. My fingers are black with ink that will never wash clean. I stand, because the road forks, but there is no choice. Only forward. Only memory. I walk until dust finds me at a circle of black stones sunk into the earth like teeth. Each is carved with spirals that twist when I blink. The ground between them is churned mud frozen into ridges like old scars. This is the stone of binding, where the wardens made their darkest bargains. I step inside the circle. The wind stops instantly. My breath fogs in still, dead air. The journal heats painfully at my side. Speak. I sink to my knees. I pull the book free. It opens by itself. Ink slithers out, forming words that hiss. Witness. Confess. Remember. Faces appear in the ink, mouths sewn shut with wire. My voice cracks. I see you. The wind is gone. I remember you. I read them. Of the elders who signed pacts in blood. Of children taken as payment. Of entire villages erased so the fog would sleep one more year. The stones vibrate. Cracks split them, leaking black liquid that sizzles on the cold ground. I don't stop. I read until my voice breaks, sobs hitching in my chest. When I finish, the stones fall silent. The wind returns, soft and mournful. I close the journal. My fingers shake. But I stand, because the vow doesn't care about pain, only that I speak, and I will. The path rises toward a hill that cuts the sky in two. Wind howls without mercy, dragging old prayers through the grass. At its crest stands a statue of a woman cloaked and hooded in black stone, her face hidden, hands clasped in silent mourning. They call this place the Mourner's Hill. No village lies nearby. No offerings remain. Only the wind and the frost. I climb slowly, boots crunching frozen ground. The journal presses hot against my ribs, eager to speak. Speak. My breath fogs in the chill. I reach the base of the statue and sink to my knees. My legs tremble. The wind dies, as if even it dares not interrupt. I pull the journal free. It opens without my hand. Ink slithers onto the page, crawling in lines that bite the eye. Witness. Confess. Remember. Faces appear in the ink, twisted in grief, mouths stitched shut with black thread. My voice cracks. I see you. Silence answers. I remember you. I read them. Of families that offered their own to the fog to buy one more harvest. Of priests who hid the truth in blood-soaked altars. Of children who screamed and were silenced. The statue weeps black tears that freeze before hitting the ground. I keep reading until my voice breaks. When I finish, the wind returns, cold but clean. The statue stops weeping. I close the journal. My hands are black with ink that bites into my skin. But I stand, because mourning isn't enough. It must be remembered, and that is my vow. Dawn is gray as old bones. I leave the Mourner's Hill behind and cross into a field covered in brittle grass that snaps underfoot like dead twigs. Frost clings in white veins to everything. This is the pale field. No birds fly here. No beasts hunt. Even the wind feels cautious. The journal is heavy at my side. Speak. I walk until I find the marker at the center. A single standing stone, cracked through the middle, bound with rusted iron bands. Symbols etched deep pulse faintly, green light leaking like old poison. I kneel. The wind dies. I pull the journal free. It opens like a mouth eager to devour. Ink spills, spreading like a stain. Witness. Confess. Remember. Faces surface, mouths open in silent plea. My voice shakes. I see you. The field goes silent. I remember you. I read them. Of harvests bought with blood. Of bargains struck under new moons with things that had no name. Of entire families taken so the fog would sleep. The symbols on the stone burn bright, then flicker. I keep reading. My voice breaks on the words. When I'm done, the light fades. The wind returns, sad but calm. I close the journal slowly. My fingers are black with ink that won't come off. I stand, because the field is empty for a reason, and someone has to remember why. The path winds through dead hedgerows, their branches skeletal claws that scrape my cloak. The sky is flat and gray. Eventually I see it, a circle of stones around an ancient well. No rope, no bucket, just a dark mouth that breathes cold. They call it the Well of Names. I approach carefully. The ground is churned and frozen. No grass grows here. The journal is hot at my side. Speak. I drop to my knees beside the well. My breath fogs, sinking into the dark mouth. Faces swirl in the depths. Eyes wide. Mouths moving without sound. Speak. I pull the journal free. It opens like a wound. Ink runs, pooling in my palm before soaking the page. Witness. Confess. Remember. The wind stops. My voice breaks. I see you. The well seems to exhale. I remember you. I read them. Of names erased from ledgers so the fog would pass by. Of children hidden in basements, never spoken of again. Of the silence bought with blood. Faces rise in the ink, mouths open in eternal scream. I don't stop. I read until the wind returns, cold and tired. The faces fade. I close the journal. My fingers are black. I press my hand to the well. I will carry you, because no one else will. The road splits beneath a dead oak, its limbs broken by age and frost. Ropes hang from its branches, frayed and stiff with old blood. The ground is churned mud frozen in hard, twisted shapes. This is the bleak crossroads, where the condemned met their ends so others could sleep easy. The wind moans low, rattling the ropes. The journal throbs at my side. Speak. I step into the center. I kneel. My breath hitches. I pull the journal free. It opens itself. Ink leaks onto the frozen ground, forming dark lines that sink and vanish. Witness. Confess. Remember. Faces stare from the page, mouth slack, eyes begging. My voice trembles. I see you. The wind stops. I remember you. I read them. Of elders who condemned neighbors to hang so the fog would leave them alone. Of families who pretended not to see. Of children who watched and learned silence. The ropes creak. The wind holds its breath. I keep reading until my voice breaks. When I finish, the ropes are still. The wind returns, softer. I close the journal. My hands are black with ink. I stand slowly, because the road doesn't care. Only the memory matters. I leave the crossroads as the sky darkens. The wind is cold, biting through every seam in my cloak. The road leads to a circle of black stones sunk in frozen mud, their tops carved with spirals that seem to writhe when I blink. This is the stone of witness, where the wardens force confessions, where secrets were carved into flesh. The journal is hot, pulsing like a fever at my side. Speak. I kneel in the center. The wind dies. My breath smokes in the stillness. I pull the journal free. It opens on its own. Ink pools, slithering into words that burn to see. Witness. Confess. Remember. Faces appear, mouths torn open in accusation. My voice is raw. I see you. Silence presses in. I remember you. I read them. Of the confessions bought with screams. Of truth paid in blood so the fog would sleep. Of the silence that followed, deafening. The stones vibrate. Cracks spread like veins. I don't stop. I keep reading until my voice fails. The wind returns with a sigh. The stones go quiet. I close the journal. My fingers black with ink that will never come clean. I stand, because forgetting is betrayal, and I will not betray them. The road drops into a hollow where the wind seems afraid to follow. Frost clings in gray veins to twisted roots that rise from the ground like the fingers of something buried alive. At the center stands a circle of iron posts, rusted and leaning. Chains hang between them, links blackened with old blood. They sway without wind, creaking like broken bones. This is the hollow of chains, where those offered were bound, where silence was enforced with steel. The journal thrums at my side, hot as a wound. Speak. I step carefully between the posts. Chains brush my shoulders, leaving smears of cold rust. The ground is churned mud frozen in grotesque shapes. Knees, palms, faces screaming in silence. I sink to my knees. The wind dies. I pull the journal free. It opens eagerly. Ink runs in thick ropes across the page, seeping onto the frozen earth. Witness. Confess. Remember. Faces rise from the ink, mouths stretched in silent wails. My voice shakes. I see you. Silence answers. I remember you. I read them. Of prisoners shackled here so the fog would turn away. Of families who watched in silence. Of chains forged in fear, their rattling a promise of safety bought with flesh. The chains groan, tightening. I keep reading, voice breaking. The posts tremble. The wind returns as a whisper. I close the journal. My fingers are black with ink that seeps into the cracks of my skin. I stand slowly, because this hollow remembers. And so must I. I climb out of the hollow at dawn, breath steaming. The land flattens into a field where nothing grows but ash. The ground is gray, choked with memories burned to keep them hidden. The wind picks up, swirling fine dust into the air. It clings to my clothes, my skin, my tongue. Tastes like old sorrow. In the center stands a single stone, blackened by fire. Symbols scar its surface, half melted by heat that never truly died. I approach carefully. The journal pulses. Speak. I fall to my knees in the ash. My breath wheezes through my dry throat. I pull the journal free. It opens on its own. Ink spills onto the page, spreading like blood and water. Witness. Confess. Remember. Faces appear in the ink, mouths agape, an eternal scream. My voice cracks. I see you. The wind dies. I remember you. I read them. Of villages burned to deny the fog hosts. Of elders who ordered the flames and called it mercy. Of survivors who were told to forget for their own good. Ash swirls around me, stinging my eyes. I don't stop. I keep reading until my voice is gone. The wind returns, softer. The ash settles. I close the journal slowly. My fingers are black with ink. I stand, because forgetting is easy, and I will not allow it. The road curves through frost-bitten grass toward a low hill crowned with ancient stones. Between them stands a crude altar, blackened with old blood, its surface carved with dozens of severed tongues rendered in cold stone. This is the shrine of silent tongues, where truth was cut from the mouth before it could be spoken. The wind falls away to hush. The journal heats at my side, trembling. Speak. I approach the altar. The carved tongues seem to writhe when I blink, each one a promise broken. I kneel. My knees crack on frozen earth. I pull the journal free. It opens eagerly. Ink slithers onto the page, coiling into biting words. Witness. Confess. Remember. Faces press against the parchment, mouth sealed with black thread. My voice breaks. I see you. The wind dies completely. I remember you. I read them. Of those whose tongues were cut to keep the fog at bay. Of secrets traded in mutilation. Of the silence enforced so truth wouldn't wake old gods. The altar weeps black ichor. I keep reading, sobbing now. When I finish, the ichor dries. The wind returns, mournful. I close the journal slowly. My hands are black with ink that burns. I stand, because silence was paid in blood, and I will not forget. Dusk bleeds across the land as I approach a low ridge marked by twin stones. Both are split down the center, filled with black resin that gleams wet in the dying light. This is the scarred threshold, where the vow was once enforced, where those who tried to run were bound and branded. The wind howls around me, cold as knives. The journal is hot against my ribs, pressing, demanding. Speak. I kneel between the stones. My breath smokes in ragged clouds. I pull the journal free. It opens without force. Ink spills thick and black, leaking between my fingers. Witness. Confess. Remember. Faces leer from the page, mouths open in voiceless accusation. My voice trembles. I see you. The wind dies. I remember you. I read them. Of those who fled their vows. Of truths buried in shallow graves. Of silence bought with branded flesh and screams swallowed by frost. The resin in the stones bubbles, smoking. I don't stop. I read until my voice fails. The stones crack further, hissing. The wind returns, softer. I close the journal carefully. My fingers are black with ink that burns. I stand, because the threshold remains. And so must I. Dawn breaks pale over frostbitten fields. The road winds onward, vanishing into gray mist. No end in sight. No promise of rest. The wind cuts at my face, but I keep moving. My boots crunch frozen soil. My breath rattles in my chest like old chains. The journal rests heavy at my side, pulsing in time with my heart. Speak. I stop. I turn slowly, facing the empty land behind me. Every place I've walked. Every confession I have forced from the silence. My voice is rough. I see you. The wind holds its breath. I remember you. I pull the journal free. It opens in my hands. Ink runs like blood. Witness. Confess. Remember. Faces swim in the ink, mouths open in eternal scream. I read them. Every bargain. Every betrayal. Every truth buried so the fog would sleep. My voice cracks. But I don't stop. The wind returns, colder but clean. I close the journal slowly. My hands are black with ink that won't wash away. I turn back to the road. Because it doesn't end. Because forgetting is death. Because someone has to remember. And that someone is me.